Hey there, guitar fanatics. I'm coming at you today with some real straight talk about a subject that guitarists in particular seem to have an endless fascination with, and that's scales. Guitarists can't seem to get enough of them. Guitar teachers can't seem to teach enough of them. There seems to be an infinite number of videos and books on scales, and each one of them is promising you that they're going to show you this next scale that's going to turn your playing into something amazing. And yet, with the exception of a few genres of music that are mostly listened to by people that think guitar playing is a speed contest, nobody really wants to hear guitarists play scales. Think about guitarists you know of that have made it huge and their careers have persevered. Billy Gibbons is ZZ Top. Have you ever heard that guy rip a long scale passage? How about Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits, David Gilmour, Steve Lukather, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan? Now, don't get me wrong. I love shreddy guitar playing as much as anybody, and I do my fair share of it. But outside of guitar nerds like myself, that's not the thing that moves people about music. It's not what hits them in their heart and hits them in their gut. So what gives? Why is there so much emphasis on scales in the guitar community? Let's talk about scales, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's go. So let's talk a little general music theory. What is a scale anyway? A scale is a sequence of notes that are separated by a defined formula of spaces between those notes. For instance, if we take the good old major scale, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, we have 7 pitches plus the octave, and it's spaced apart as follows. Between the first note and the second note, we move a whole step, or 2 frets. Between the second note and the third note, we move another whole step. Between the third note and fourth note, we move a half step, 1 fret. Between the fourth note and the fifth note, we're going to move a whole step. Between the fifth note and the sixth note, we move a whole step. Between the sixth note and the seventh note, we move a whole step. And lastly, between that seventh note and the octave, we move another half step, or 1 fret. Now you can start on any note as the root or the first note of the scale. You could use E flat, you could use A flat, a weird note like that, or you could use a common note like C or G. But if you move between the notes with the formula I just showed you, it's going to be a major scale. If you change the spacing between any of the notes in any way, it's no longer the major scale. So why would it be important to learn this? And what are some good things about learning scales? So number one, we use the notes of a scale to build chords. For instance, there's 7 notes in the major scale, and we can build multiple chords off each one of those notes. Knowing the notes in a scale allows us to know which chords are going to be in a key, whether they're going to be major or minor or some other more complicated chord. That is extremely valuable from the standpoint of trying to learn and understand songs. Or if you're trying to write songs, it's going to help you know in advance which chords sound good together. Way too often for my taste, I see students that have learned some chord shapes, but they have no idea how or why those chords relate to one another. So it's almost impossible for them to learn and play a song without having a chord sheet or a tab sitting in front of them. Knowing a little bit of theory can really help you shortcut the song learning and the song writing process. Another good thing about scales is learning to play scale patterns does help get your fingers moving. It helps you develop an understanding of how the fretboard is laid out and how all the notes relate to one another. And on one level, that is a very good thing. So how can learning scales be bad? It's bad because many guitarists don't go beyond just learning the fingering pattern of a scale. And the bottom line is, just because you know how to play a scale pattern, ascending and descending, doesn't mean you have any idea how to take the individual notes within that scale and make them sound good over a particular chord or set of chords. Knowing the fingering pattern of a scale is just the starting point of what I would consider to be knowing a scale. If you really want to know a scale, you have to learn it inside and out. You have to dig into each note of the scale and get a good idea of how it sounds and relates to each chord in a key. For instance, let's take that C major scale and play each of the notes over a static C chord. So over that static C, here's the C note of the root. Sounds okay, but sounds pretty boring. How about the second? It's pretty interesting. Here's the third. It's got a nice sweet sound. Check out the fourth. Ooh. Kind of dissonant, but it sounds cool if we move from there to the fifth. Another chord tone. The sixth. Another interesting tone. Here's the major seven. And back to the root. Really good guitarists have a very strong sense of how a particular note is going to sound over a particular chord, and they also know what kind of reaction that's going to elicit from the people that hear them play. Because of that, they're able to spend more time playing the really good notes and make sure that they get the maximum impact from every note that they play. That brings us to the next bad aspect of learning scales. If you spend too much time practicing scale patterns only, when you go to improvise or play a solo, it's going to sound like you're practicing scales. I can't tell you the number of students that have said to me, you know, Charlie, I know quite a few scales, I can play them really fast and clean, but when I go to play solos, it just sounds like I'm practicing my scales and I don't know what to do to make it sound more musical. These students are working hard and they're working on something that could be good, but maybe they're not going about it in the right way. We're going to talk about some things that'll make your scale practice more productive, and also a couple of things that will make your playing more musical just in a minute. But first, let's talk about the ugly part of scales and guitar. The ugly, there's a couple of things to discuss here, and frankly, I think they all relate to the ego of both guitar teachers and guitar students. Let's talk about teachers first. Guitar teachers are under a lot of pressure to keep showing their students concepts. They're going to keep the student happy, so the student will keep paying them money. I know from experience that most students are not going to take the time to really master the important but boring aspects of guitar playing. So it's easy to start feeling like you have to give your students more and more stuff. And frankly, it's really easy to pile page after page of scale diagrams on people. Another related aspect is it's really easy to show a student progress when you're teaching them scales. You can imagine, this week, I give you a sheet with a scale on it, you can't play it at all. You come back a week later, it's a little shaky, but you can get through it and you're getting a little speed going. You come back a week after that, you can play it twice as fast as the week before, and you start to think, my guitar teacher is a genius. And the student ends up getting hooked on playing faster and faster and learning more and more scales because they are starting to see themselves make a very specific kind of progress. It doesn't matter that they'd still make a fool of themselves if they went out and tried to play at the local blues jam or if they joined a local band. Practicing your vibrato, for instance, is far more subjective. Practicing getting your bends in perfect tune or getting a good handle on what the interval sounds like feels like digging a ditch compared to just whizzing through some scale patterns. Now that leads us to the students, the learners, whom I feel get caught up in a vicious circle of ego and insecurity on one hand and the need for instant gratification on the other. Everyone wants to see good progress, and it's really easy to see that you're constantly turning your metronome faster and faster. And there's also something that feels really good about being the fastest player on the block or being the person in your guitar school that seems to know the most scales. But once again, that doesn't mean that that player is going to sound good if they go out to the local blues jam or if they're trying to record something or even if they're trying to write a really good solo. So you're learning to play lead guitar. Should you spend time learning scales? The answer, of course, is yes. But I want to give you some other things to practice also to make sure your development as a player is well-rounded, balanced, and most of all, musical. Number one, practice playing melodies. Pick up your guitar, try to sound out Happy Birthday. Amazing Grace. Pretty much any melody that you hear, pick up your guitar, try to play it. You're not going to be very good at it in the beginning. But one of the benefits of practicing scales and hearing how all the notes fit together across the strings is that your ear is going to start to develop, and it's going to become easier and easier to find the notes in your head on the fretboard. Now, once you start to get better at playing simple melodies, start to add phrasing like bends, like vibrato, like slides. For instance, I can really spice up Happy Birthday just by adding some vibrato, bends, and slides to some of the notes. Check it out. You can also listen to famous singers and try to copy the phrasing that they add to their vocal melodies. That is an incredible way to practice. Now, if you're brand new to soloing, I can't think of a better thing to learn than the triads within a key. Learn which notes make up each triad and get good at making up phrases by using a couple of notes of that triad and then a note or two that's not in the triad. It will make your soloing sound so much more interesting. Now, here's a great example. Over a C chord, I could play a C triad. The notes C, E, and G. It sounds right, it sounds correct, but it also sounds boring. Or over that same C chord, I could play a C note, an F note, a D note, then an E, and then a G. So I still had the notes of the triad, C, E, and G, but I threw in F and D too. Now, I made a cool musical statement that ironically I'm able to make because I do know the major scale really well and what notes of it are in or not in certain chords. But I have to emphasize, I'm not just waving my fingers around playing a scale pattern. I'm actively trying to put together a combination of notes that I know is going to sound really good over that chord. Lastly, learn some licks by your favorite players. Develop some vocabulary other than scale patterns that you can draw from. Pay close attention to their phrasing and how they structure their solos. Now, you might hear them rip through a scale, but what did they do on either side of that scale run to set it up? Getting those concepts in your head and under your fingers is super important also. So in closing, scales are a tool. And like any tool, they can be super useful if used the right way and super destructive if used the wrong way. You can use a saw to help you build something really awesome. But you can also use a saw to cut part of your arm off. I hope you get my point. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more great guitar stuff each week. Practice hard, have a lot of fun, never stop learning. See you soon.